So thank you for having me back again. I'm going to be talking about our health and safety awareness curricula in Washington State. A little background on that. In the mid-90s, I did a first research study that looked at and identified that 16, 17-year-olds were injured at a rate 2 to 3 times higher than adults 18 and older. And that was pretty alarming, and also looking at the types of injuries. And so then I started to present that to our organization and organized the School to Work Occupational Safety and Health Steering Committee to try to identify interventions. And one of those was to help reach out to employers, and another was to develop health and safety curriculum. And this was at a time that the School to Work Opportunities Act came into being in the mid-90s. It was supposed to teach all youth, not just those in vocational education programs, about work-based learning and all aspects of industry. And those of us in the field were pretty alarmed that all aspects of industry did not include health and safety. This was the mid-90s, and Dawn was there, and many others, well, not that many others, but we went to the Departments of Education and Labor to say, health and safety education, hello, you know, these teachers are now going to be responsible for this. And and then soon thereafter, NIOSH, again, funded projects in 3 locations to start to look at developing health and safety curricula for high school students and getting the community involved. And because we had the steering committee and we identified that we needed curriculum, we started to take some of what had already been developed through one of the NIOSH projects and adapted it to Washington State. We did go to our State Department of Education to say to them that all vocational education teachers and all teachers should have some health and safety education training, and there was a period of time where we were successful in requiring that for all vocational education teachers, including agriculture. But that was, you know, that's the type of thing I'll mention at the end about sustainability and systemic changes which are all going to face going forward with this as well. This is not a new problem. When I talk to audiences, regardless of who they are, I like you to put yourself back in the position of your first job, and whether you were ever told there were safety hazards, were any of your coworkers, and often sometimes kids would tell me about their parents being injured, and then were you ever told what to do if you were injured? And I'm not just talking about teenagers. I'm talking to people who are adults, you know, health and safety professionals, parents, employers, et cetera. Because I'd like people to kind of get back into the mindset to think about, well, what just was it like? If we had time, I'd go around the room and ask you. So our curriculum is an awareness level curriculum. Again, this might be a prequel to learning about specific industry standards or specific hazards, but it's a way to start to get everyone, all youth, on a page about health and safety in the workplace. And it can be adapted. We were one of the first states to create a state-based health and safety curriculum. I know we have a national curriculum through NIOSH, Talking Safety, that can adapt each individual state's regulations, but we were the first to actually do this. And we first developed, our first curriculum was on non-agricultural employment, and then agricultural employment, culinary arts, and an OSHA's 11, which I'll describe for general industry. But all of these things can be adapted. The units in the curriculum, you know, are pretty consistent across each type of curriculum that we have, and then they're adapted, again, based on the particular industry sector and hazards. So I'll go through each of these, but one of the interesting things about all of them is all the modules are on a web page, and they're all free with the PowerPoints and the teaching modules, the teacher aid items, the fact sheets, pre and post tests. But all of the modules can be mixed and matched depending on your setting. And these are the common elements. So we try to, you know, first of all, help youth understand what hazards are and how to categorize them. Are they biologic? Are they chemical? Are they safety? Are they physical hazards? And, you know, there's a short DVD that we developed that actually NIOSH adapted from our state DVD, is now a national one, and helping them to develop some practice. And hazard mapping is a very fun and useful tool that I'll show you here that students can develop some of the ones that I've seen are so incredibly detailed. My favorite is a Baskin-Robbins, but I didn't have a slide of it. But you can have, and this is where after they've learned to categorize hazards, then they draw their own map and they may work in groups. It could be quick service, it could be a farm setting, it could be construction, where they actually are having this exercise to identify what they know might be a hazard after learning a few basic things in the beginning. And then learning about what some issues related to both workplace rights, whether it's wages, rest and meal breaks, using the bathroom. Imagine that in the 21st century is still debatable as to whether we get to have people use the bathroom. And child labor laws is very definitely a specific focus in this curriculum because it does focus on those under age 18. But again, there are a lot of elements of all of these curriculum that can be used. Especially also for, there's also another curriculum out there that's for limited language. Individuals with learning disabilities. California has actually taken it another step to help that's helpful for low literacy individuals with learning disabilities or where English is not a first language. So there are other games, they're all interactive. That's one of the big key components about this curriculum is to make them all interactive. Learning about prevention strategies. I'll show you the Clever game. That was one game that I know others had used and it's been modified over the course of time, but where it's a kind of a brainstorming and like a team effort. And I'll show you that toward the end. I'm going kind of quickly through this because I know that it's in your handout. Another issue that we encourage youth to speak up. You saw the poster. There's a lot of efforts to get youth to speak up, which is not all that easy. So there's a whole unit on conflict resolution and how to talk about issues. And I think that's really a critical piece in teaching youth, young people, about how to argue their case. Now, some people maybe not argue, but speak up about a safety issue, speak up to somebody who's an authority, who's in a power position. They've got this double jeopardy. They're an employee in the employer situation sometimes, and then they're also the kid versus the adult. So it makes it very difficult to, and people tell me, well, you can be fired for speaking up, and I will just kind of say I'd rather they go home the way they went to work, without it, rather go home and lose their job than lose their life or a limb. And the other big one that we've had incorporated into all of our modules, that again is available for anyone, is on sexual harassment in the workplace. And this is a very big issue. I think that it's very important for us to continue to include. When I was in graduate school, I actually did a paper on sexual harassment as an occupational hazard. My professor at the time didn't think it was work-related, so that was kind of curious. But Clever is a game, and there are other different modifications of this game that people use, a pyramid safety game. But the definitions, and they're more described in the curriculum materials online, is I'll give you a couple scenarios, and we have a lot of scenarios, either for both in the agriculture curriculum as well as culinary arts as well as non-agriculture, where you give a scenario and then you have people speak up to tell you what would you change in this scenario to prevent the injury from happening, what laws should have been in place or enforced, what equipment, whether it's personal protective equipment or whether some other piece of equipment would have been better, whether speaking up, using your voice, would education and supervision have been useful in preventing this injury, and then would removing, obviously, substitution or removal of the hazard in some manner, or removing the person, frankly, from the hazard is another strategy. I won't go through the silo one since we've been, it's in your handout. This is a tractor one. So you end up reading the scenario, and these were real scenarios that happened some may have happened in Washington State, some in Massachusetts, different people who have access to injury data and injury descriptions. So you read this to the group of people and then they're working in teams, and then what clever strategies would have been could be used to have prevented this injury from happening. And I do this with employers, actually. And I've learned a lot from employers because I'll have them play the game. And I've learned some really interesting things from them that I hadn't thought of. And again, I'll use some of the same information to teach employers about workplace safety because they often don't have that education and that background. So we have an OSHA's 11 general industry. It was actually created to be a youth version of OSHA 10 in the general industry for certification. The additional hour is on workplace rights and child labor issues. They are all very interactive. And they can, if it's an OSHA authorized trainer, they can receive their general industry card. L&I, Labor and Industries in Washington State, is currently developing an OSHA 10 for agriculture, so I'll be sure to let this group know about that when that comes forward. Again, all of the modules are available and can be mixed and matched for the individual situation. So another thing in outgrowth, having worked with all these teachers to get this information to, it turned out we tried to integrate workplace safety education in our essential academic learning requirements. They were called ELERs under our Department of Education that they incorporate. But really, we had to go teacher by teacher, and I would go to a lot of teacher conferences to talk to them about teaching health and safety. And actually, a vocational education teacher who was recertifying voc ed teachers for many years would have myself and my colleague come to do like a 3-hour training for them to learn how to teach workplace health, occupational safety and health. But we got, for about 15, I kind of opened my mouth one year, and we have one of the long-standing governor's safety and health conferences that covers a lot of different industries, including agriculture. For about 15 years, I brought about 100 kids to the program, to the governor's conference. This was sort of an outgrowth, again, of working with teachers, and it was a huge amount of work, but so much fun. To have all these kids coming to this wonderful, amazing resource. We created a youth-oriented program with a PPE fashion show. We focused on specific hazards, often noise exposure or ergonomics. And then this exhibit hall exploration, where it was a scavenger hunt. They had to go and actually ask questions of the vendors about what the hazard was, or what the PPE was, or what the prevention was, or what the career was. So that was really a very successful outgrowth of working with teachers. I just want to point out that it's really important to talk to youth about what their perceptions are. And finally, it dawned on me to maybe have a focus group with teens. Now, these kids were in a food service industry, but it could be done anywhere. But I thought it was very interesting that many thought that training from their employers was really a big concern. They really liked one-on-one in particular. I called it nagging. They didn't. But to them, it demonstrated concern, and that was really relevant for them. They identified that managers needed more safety training. I didn't prompt them in any way, and that they understood that safety rested with their manager. A couple things that got me very concerned as a nurse, that none of them actually were directed to file a worker comp claim who'd had serious injuries. And at that time, none of them had health insurance, frankly. And we all pay into worker comp in our state. So, that was very disturbing that they didn't get immediate care and that they didn't get first aid as well. So I often also, when I'm talking to any audience, I'm not going to go through this right now, but I make sure that everybody knows what each other's responsibilities are. This is the employer responsibility, and this is your responsibility as an employee. So I really emphasize these depending on the different audience who I'm talking to. And, for the employer, I can't say it enough. Repetition, repetition, repetition is like one of the constant mantras. Well, I already told them that. Well, stand on your head and tell them again, Make sure they hear. And definitely including supervisors and not just supervisors, including coworkers. I think sometimes we think that it's only going to fall on the supervisor to help young workers. And I think it's really good to be having coworkers, including other young coworkers. The peer-to-peer, which I think Bill started to bring up, is really an important element. So some of these considerations have been brought up by other people, is the delivery methods that we have to be thinking about in terms of timing and location, whether or not we have the appropriate and adequate training methods. Teachers do not have enough time to be teaching. So we have a serious problem in terms of trying to get information that is maybe not seen as critical to some. And so how to reach those those people who are making decisions about time and funding to make this happen is really important. And we've already talked about the competence of instructors is critical, but peer education should also not be overlooked in terms of youth providing training to each other. Sometimes they often listen to each other. Again, some of the things that I've been reading about as I was getting ready for this conference is looking at the attitudes of youth regarding safety. And I have a number of articles that are in the reference list that address each one of these elements about their doubtful about their ability to prevent injuries in the first place, reluctance to speak up, having peer pressures, which is often really driving many of their behaviors. I think David was showing some examples of that. Competing demands, blaming themselves, oh, I'm so stupid. And then we also have to really be thinking about evaluation of our of any materials that we're using or the delivery methods. And for years, many of us have been trying to reach the U.S. Department of Education, NIOSH, USDOL through the Employment Training Agency, OSHA, to get them to be talking about integrating health and safety education into workplace programs and job skill developments. Health and safety training is part of job skill development, part of 21st century skills, and many of us were very happy when NIOSH created the initiative on the safe, skilled, and ready workforce because it incorporates and embeds the need for health and safety education. I do want to point out it's also in your reference list. My last comment is about a really great tool that NIOSH developed as a result of the 3 grants they funded in the 90s to develop some materials curriculum. It's called Promoting Safe Work for Young Workers, a Community-Based Approach. So you were talking about community-based resources, and this is a really great outline. It's very hard to find on your webpage, though, I have to say, but I do give I finally found the webpage. It's in your resource list. And, you know, it's a really great way to look at integrating all the various community partners and stakeholders in coming together, again, depending on your setting. And Sherry gave a very nice outline of all the different ways that we have to modify and adapt our resources depending on the audience and the circumstance. So I thank you very much. And Dennis, take it away. Do you need